Jurassic Park is a book published in 1990, written by Michael Crichton. It's a story I've been reading for the past few months for school, and it's about a group of people taking a visit to an unfinished island resort full of dinosaurs until stuff happens. And funny story, I've been supposed to keep a reading journal that I'd update every other week. I did not do that. So rather than rewinding time and correcting the mistakes of the past, I've decided to do a little bit of something different. A video project on the book. Will this even qualify for a good grade? I have no idea. So, yeah, this is the video. You're watching it, I swear.
Here lies Squidward's hopes and dreams. What a baby.
So, one important idea my teacher wanted to get across while explaining the requirements of the journals is to avoid writing a summary for our journal entries. I've got summaries in my veins. I must summarize things. I must. I don't have a problem, I swear. Please don't test me for it. So, in case you've never read Jurassic Park, and in case you've never watched it either, basically, the plot goes something like this. A bunch of people all take a trip to an island, and on this island is a resort, a sort of park for dinosaurs. It's not done yet. It's opening to the public in maybe a few months. So this group is a pre-opening tour. Somewhere in the middle of the tour, during a rainstorm at night, because dark and stormy nights, obviously, all the power goes out. Yeah, the park requires power for pretty much everything, and it was built in mind to almost never lose the power. Only once in a while for maintenance checks. So, since there's no powers, the electrified fence goes out too, which is kind of the only thing keeping most of the dinosaurs from escaping their enclosures. So, then the dinosaurs escape. Mind blown. Meaning the group that's touring and the employees at the park need to work together to bring the power back on and survive. Whew. That's so much better. Summary taken care of. Now I can carry on with the grieving process.
Jurassic Park is frightening in the dark. All the dinosaurs are running.
As I'm technically not allowed to just write a summary, I have to talk about something else concerning the book right now. So, I'm going to be talking about the theme. That's right. I'm going to now be talking about the theme. Just like organ harvesting, multiple themes can be extracted from one story.
You stole my kidney!
So, I'll be talking about multiple themes. So, I think the theme is pretty obvious. And in fact, it's so obvious that 3 to 4 year old me was able to decipher it upon watching the film adaptation for the very first time. And the theme was, don't ride a helicopter to an island. Boom. That simple. Hahaha, just kidding. While it is true that to prevent yourself from getting eaten by a dinosaur on an island resort, you can just not go to that island. But the theme's not that. Now that I've matured and grown as a person, I'm lying, I know that some of the actual themes are as follows. Trying to play a god can be devastating. Just because you can doesn't mean you should, and greed will cause pain. I will go over each of these themes one by one and justify why those are the themes, using textual evidence.
Behold, Arthur, this is the Holy Grail. Look well, Arthur, for it is your sacred...
Playing God generally doesn't work very well in the end because of this simple reason. You are not God. Only God knows how to do the thing what you're trying to do. One of the reasons why the Jurassic Park resort failed and ended up killing quite a few individuals was that it relied too much upon controlling nature. In other words, playing God. Near the end of the chapter, The Tour, chapter 3 of the third iteration, Henry Wu, the lead geneticist of the park, explains that the dinosaurs cannot breed because, a breeding population is difficult to control. He quotes, quote, "First of all, they're sterile, because we irradiate them with X-rays," end quote. Wu explains, quote, And all the animals in Jurassic Park are female. End quote. Also, shortly in the following chapter, Control, Wu explains that it's impossible to lose one of the animals, and that they die in the wild anyways if they did. He explains, quote, "Our animals are counted by computer every few minutes. If one were missing, we'd know at once." End quote. He also mentions, quote, "In the outside world, our animals will die within 12 hours, because I've made them lysine dependent." End quote. Sounds like they're unable to breed nor escape, yeah? Wu took such care and made sure of it, right? However, they did end up breeding and escaping and surviving in the wild. In the end of chapter 11 of the third iteration, titled Stegosaur, Dr. Alan Grant found the remnants of a hatched velociraptor egg, proving that at least the velociraptors were able to breed. And in the following chapter, chapter 12 of the third iteration, also called Control, fun fact, 10 of the chapters are called Control. The computers that control the park, their search parameters were changed to look for more than just the expected amount. And in the table, it is shown that myosaurs, procompsognathids, Ophnielia, velociraptors, and hypsilodontids, all, whatever those names are, they're all able to breed. And that computer says that it was able to find 292 dinosaurs out of the expected 238 that are supposed to be accounted for. So that proves that the animals were indeed breeding. But not only proves that they were breeding, it also proves that the computer's counting system was flawed for all this time, meaning that some of the animals could have escaped and then remained undetected by the computers. Not only that, but in the first chapter of the first iteration, titled Almost Paradise, a little girl was bitten by an animal that is now obviously known to be a procompsognathed. And it was even suggested that in the last chapter of the first iteration, The Shape of the Data, that the partially eaten corpse found on the beach belonged to a dinosaur. Quote, "Stone went and got the lizard fragment and shook it out of the baggie. I don't know," Alice Levin said, "but that looks like a dinosaur to me." End quote. So it's been proven that the dinosaurs have been breeding and escaping, and they are certainly surviving well enough to bite little kids and newborn babies all around Costa Rica, as suggested in Chapter 2 of the first iteration, The Beach. Because John Hammond, the owner of the park, tried to play God and control an entire group of hardly understood species, he inevitably failed in doing so, and ended up causing a lot of harm to lots of people.
Fossils. Da, da, da. Fossils.
So, just because you can do something, doesn't mean you should. Or in the words of the late Uncle Ben,
Remember, with great power comes great responsibility.
just because you've mastered karate and have the ability to kill someone with your bare hands, does not mean you should just go around killing every random dude you pass on the street. Just because you have access to weapons of mass destruction, does not mean you should just use them to put an end to an entire country that you disagree with. Just because you can put a funny-looking crystal into the beam of an anti-mess spectrometer doesn't mean you should. And similarly, just because you can clone a bunch of very dangerous dinosaurs and put them into a park that you expect children to attend does not mean you should. And I don't believe I can explain it any better than Ian Malcolm did, the mathematician that attended the tour and predicted that the whole park would fail from the very beginning. This quote comes from in the middle of the 5th iteration, and wouldn't you know it, this chapter is called Control. So basically, Ian Malcolm starts lecturing John Hammond on responsibility after Hammond claims that nothing should have gone wrong since building the park was so simple, as people outside were literally fighting for their lives so they wouldn't end up being literally mauled by the velociraptors. Okay. So, this quote's a pretty big one, so hold on tight. Quote, "You know what's wrong with scientific power?" Malcolm said. "It's a form of inherited wealth. And you know what congenitally rich people are? Most kinds of power require a substantial sacrifice by whomever wants power. There is an apprenticeship A discipline lasting many years. Whatever it is you seek, you have to put in the time, practice, the effort, and once you've attained it, it is your power. It can't be given away. It resides in you. Now, what is interesting about this process is that by the time someone has acquired the ability to kill with his bare hands, he has also matured to the point where he won't use it unwisely. But scientific power is like inherited wealth, attained without discipline. You read what others have done, and you take the next step. There is no humility before nature. There is only a get-rich-quick, make-a-name-for-yourself-fast philosophy. Scientists are all trying to do the same thing. To do something big and do it fast. You don't even know exactly what you've done, but you've already reported it, patented it, and sold it. A karate master does not kill with his bare hands. The person who kills is the person who has no discipline, no restraint, and who has purchased his power in the form of a Saturday night special. And this is the kind of power that science fosters and permits. And that is why you think that to build this park is simple. End quote. Malcolm calls out Hammond's irresponsibility and foolishness while he was trying to justify his park. Hammond simply did not understand that his park was inherently dangerous. Hammond had the power, the money, to make an amusement park. He also had the resources, the money, to find people to help him make that park. But he never had the discipline to realize that people could very easily die if things go wrong. And people very easily died when things went wrong. With how much he knows about dinosaurs, they're just another animal. He's just making a special kind of zoo. But he failed to realize that this is more than a zoo. Zookeepers understand the animals at the zoo very well, as they've spent loads of time with the animals, and the animals have been studied for centuries. But at Jurassic Park, they've only studied the animals for like maybe a few years. They don't even know what the right tranquilizer dosages are. And yet, Hammond thinks that he can open the park for literal children within the next few months. Because Hammond has no discipline and failed to acknowledge the potential consequences, the park failed and lots of people got hurt. And now for a message from our sponsor, the dinosaurs. So, in case you couldn't tell, I don't like John Hammond. He's not a good guy, and fun fact, he's also racist. No, really, go look at the chapter Almost Paradigm, third chapter of the 7th iteration. I'll read the quote for you. Quote, "He passed one of the workmen, who nodded curtly. Hammond did not return the nod. He found the Teacan workmen to be uniformly insolent. To tell the truth, the choice of this island off Costa Rica had been unwise. He would not make such obvious mistakes again." End quote. Right there, he called one of the workers rude for just nodding at him, and then went to call all of the workers rude, and then he called making the resort on a Costa Rican island an obvious mistake. Sounds pretty racist to me. Also, earlier in the same chapter, after all the people who were at Jurassic Park almost died, Hammond went out for a stroll to clear his head. In his head, he blamed the failure of the park on all the people he hired, 3 of which died earlier that same day. Also, one of the names he neglected to mention was Nedry, the person who literally turned off the power so he could steal embryos for some cash money. Power loss was the reason the whole ordeal began. Hammond didn't once think to take responsibility for his negligence, and instead blamed it on whoever he could. And he didn't even blame Nedry, the guy who literally got this whole train wreck a-rollin'. So, Hammond's racist, egotistic, negligent, what else? He's greedy. In Chapter 4 of the 4th iteration, Bungalow, Hammond was having a conversation with Henry Wu in his bungalow, while having a dinner that was described to be rather expensive. Hammond talks to Wu about the park a bit. He at one point says, quote, "This is our triumph, this park. We have done what we have set out to do. And you remember, our original intent was to use the newly emerging technology of genetic engineering to make money. A lot of money. If you were going to start a bioengineering company, Henry, What would you do? Would you make products to help mankind? To fight illness and disease? Dear me, no. That's a terrible idea. End quote. Hammond didn't really want to see the joy on the faces of the children who came to Jurassic Park. He wanted to make money, and he even goes on a rant on how using bioengineering to help people is a terrible idea for business. His entire focus was profit. And in fact, he literally built and ran the park with maximum profit in mind. One of these things that Hammond did was make the park run mostly on computers to minimize the amount of employees, as described in the second Control chapter, Chapter 6 of the third iteration. In that chapter, John Arnold, the head of the control room, said, quote, "I can run the park single-handedly if I have to. We've got that much automation built in. The computer by itself can track the animals, feed them, and fill their water troughs for 48 hours without supervision." End quote. Hammond also refused to allow any of the animals to be killed, except at a very, very last resort, because an animal dying would cost a lot of money to replace. Muldoon, the game warden of the park, describes the foolishness of this very well. A certain species of animals at the park, the Dilophosaurs, turned out to be able to secrete venom and even spit it. This was a danger to anyone at the park, so it became a priority to remove poison sacs. Quote, "No one knew where this poison was being secreted, and no one would ever know until an autopsy was performed on a Dilophosaur. And management, Hammond, would not allow one to be killed." End quote. Also, Muldoon describes the velociraptors to be natural cage breakers and incredibly dangerous. Quote, "Velociraptors were instinctive hunters, and they never passed up prey. They were swift, strong runners, and astonishing jumpers. They had lethal claws in all 4 limbs, and they had powerful tearing jaws that ripped flesh instead of biting it. They were far more intelligent than the other dinosaurs. The velociraptors could escape with ease, and when, as Muldoon had feared, one of them finally escaped, it killed 2 construction workers and maimed a 3rd before being recaptured." End quote. Because of all these dangerous dinosaurs, quote, Muldoon wanted guns as well, and he wanted shoulder-mounted law missiles launchers. Hunters knew how difficult it was to bring down a 4-ton African elephant, and some of the dinosaurs weighed 10 times as much. Management, Hammond, was horrified, insisting that there be no guns anywhere on the island. When Muldoon threatened to quit and to take his story to the press, a compromise was reached. End quote. So, the dinosaurs are extremely dangerous, and even had killed some people already, and yet Hammond still had the audacity to limit the safety precautionary weaponry to non-lethal because killing dinosaurs is too expensive. And it took Muldoon's threat to ruin the park's public relations to get some sort of safety weaponry on the island. Ian Malcolm was right. Hammond isn't. Who literally valued the expensive dinosaurs more than any form of human life other than his own. Add that to the list. Anyway, because of all this greed, Hammond's park failed and killed a bunch of people. Should he have just hired like one more group of employees to be in charge of the power of the island, the power wouldn't have been able to be turned off in the control room. Had Hammond let Muldoon and the other workers at the park use lethal weaponry for self-defense, that one velociraptor that escaped could have been stopped dead in its tracks much earlier. But no, his greed got to him and lots of people died. And no remorse. I'm glad he broke his ankle and got eaten by the Procompsognathid's. However, I hope while he's in hell he gets disemboweled while still conscious for the rest of eternity, like how Wu and Arnold had to watch their intestines get pulled out by the velociraptors before they died. The death he got was way too merciful. Man, I really hate Hammond. He had no character development whatsoever, and he'd do it all again. So, yeah, those are the themes. I finished the script late in the evening, 2 days left to finish the project. I genuinely shouldn't talk more. But I probably should mention the real world application of the themes, beyond don't make a park full of dinosaurs. So for the theme of playing God, you might know some powerful people who were or are chasing more power, and bad stuff happened to them or are going to happen to them. An example I'm pretty sure we can all agree upon is Adolf Hitler. He wanted to eradicate people, control the world, and basically become a god. And his chase for power led to his loss, thankfully. Initiating a conflict with Russia while trying to fight Europe at the same time was not a good call. Well, it was a good call for us. And thankfully, the blindness of his desire for more power stopped him. Being too powerful is a bad thing, and you should steer away from wishing to be the most powerful. Alright, so as for the theme of responsibility, restraining yourself from doing certain things usually is good. Just because you can put your hand on the stove doesn't mean you should. That's one real world application. But if you want another World War II example, here you go. The atomic bomb was developed during the war, and it was what was used to end it. But America probably could have reached a more peaceful resolution rather than bombing innocent civilians to beat Japan into submission twice. Just because Truman had the atomic bomb didn't mean he had to use it. And as for greed, I think you know greed is one of the 7 deadly sins. When you get greedy, you make choices that hurt others. Real world example in history, again. This one's not World War II though, don't worry. The big business owners were often very greedy people, and they were so greedy that it caused problems for so many people that the government had to create laws to force the business to be decent to their workers. The government made stuff like OSHA, minimum wage, and protection of unions. And you might know that a lot of the business owners today are still just as greedy and want to hurt the workers as much as they can for profit, while remaining within the legal boundaries, of course, because they'd get arrested. So please, don't be greedy and treat your fellow humans with kindness. And with that, yeah, that's all. See ya.